They aren't even in this race. They're not on the ballot. But the governor, Greg Abbott, and the attorney general, Ken Paxton, are trying to influence who you vote for tomorrow, especially if you're a Republican. Scott Braddock is with the Quorum Report. He joins us as he often does. Scott, thank you for your time right here before Election Day. Talk about why the governor and the attorney general are going after fellow Republicans in this primary.
Okay, I'm going to answer that, and I'm also going to tell you, how it's playing out there. So with the governor first, he, of course, is going after Republicans like Steve Allison, who's a state representative in San Antonio, because Allison and other Republicans that the governor opposes voted against a school voucher bill last year, a school voucher proposal on the Texas House floor. But the governor is not attacking those members of the House based primarily on that issue. Instead, he's saying that they're weak on the border. I'll come back to that. The attorney general is going after Republicans, a much larger number of Republicans who voted to call him out for corruption in his office and infidelity on his part. And the attorney general is endorsing candidates who are taking on those who voted to impeach the AG. And, in that race and in that case, and in those races, Steve, it's interesting that in a lot of ways, the attorney general's attacks on Texas House Republicans are largely more honest than what the governor is doing, because the attorney general is talking about these folks who went after him. And because he's talking about the impeachment, the attorney general is having to talk about all the alleged corruption, those allegations against himself and the allegations of infidelity. And I don't think that's playing very well in a lot of Republican districts. For the governor, it's what he's doing is more dishonest, because he's going after those Republicans who voted against him on vouchers, but he's attacking them on the issue of the border, an issue on which all of these Republicans, including someone like Steve Allison, they all voted lockstep with the governor on anything to do with immigration and border security.
So why then focus on that? Why not talk specifically about the disagreement over school vouchers?
That is the million-dollar question. Here's the million-dollar answer. Ready? Because Republican primary voters across the state, and in the last 2 months, I have been everywhere from Abilene to Nacogdoches, DFW, Houston, San Antonio, and everywhere in between. And when I talk to voters out there, they don't care about school choice and school vouchers. It's just not something they're fired up about at all. Polling reflects that, by the way. The border just really outshines any of these other issues in such a big way. Immigration and border security, almost always number one with Republican primary voters. So what the governor's doing is smart politics. He's going after these Republicans who voted against him on school vouchers. But what he's looking into the camera, and he's in some of these TV ads, and he's saying, I can't trust this candidate, this House member, to help me secure the border, and the person I need instead. And then he points to the person that he has endorsed. So it may be something that works, but that doesn't mean it's not just an outright lie.
Well, it's certainly a test of his popularity, is it not, within
Yes,
Republicans, to see if he can have this kind of influence on the race? It's not unprecedented. I mean, he did. There were a couple of Republicans that he went after, including Lyle Larson locally way back when. That wasn't particularly effective. But I don't remember the ads like we have seen in this race in particular.
Yeah, and I was at those rallies as well back in 2018 when the governor was upset with Lyle Larson and a representative at the time named Sarah Davis in Houston. And the issue of the border had not become the thing that was defining Greg Abbott. Now you see real energy at his events. People are very fired up. Republican primary voters very fired up to support whoever the governor says will be the most effective fighter when it comes to the border. So one way to think about it is that he's accruing political capital on the issue of the border and border security, and he's spending a lot of it against these House Republicans who voted against him on school vouchers.
So with the governor making ads against Steve Allison in support of his opponent, Mark LaHood, what's your read on that race in District 121?
I have to tell you, Myra, this, compared to past Republican primaries, when I talk now to consultants and the candidates themselves and people who are working on the campaigns, the campaign managers and volunteers who are on the ground in these districts day after day after day, I've never, in almost 25 years of doing this, I have never had so many of those folks just say that they're flying blind, that they don't know what's going to happen. And the reason for that is because if you look out across, all of the state and in that district you're talking about with Steve Allison versus LaHood, there have been all of these endorsements that couldn't have been maybe foreseen previously that a lot of people who watch politics closely and Republican primary voters would not have thought that the governor would actually go campaign against some of these people, would actually, be cutting ads saying that you need to get rid of this person. As somebody who, has been voted into office by a lot of these same people for so long. And the other thing that makes this really hard to predict and figure out is that the turnout has been so low. We've had obviously, low turnout elections before. On the one hand, you might think that because those folks who are turning out are not new voters, and you can see that in the data, a lot of the Republican primary voters that we're seeing turn out now are those who have voted in GOP contests before. It's not anybody there are some, but largely it's not new people who are coming in. You might think that means they'll vote for the same person they voted for before, the incumbent, somebody like Allison. But I'm also maybe a little skeptical of that, because when you have low turnout, a lot of times it's the most extreme, most dedicated voters. Those are the kind who I would say would be the kind of Republican voter who would crawl through broken glass in the rain to vote for Donald Trump or Ted Cruz, somebody like that.
Yeah, very interesting, though, that you don't have a real read on some of these, that a lot of the watchers are even like, we don't know, because it is so unprecedented to see a governor especially go after his own party members like this. Before we let you go, I want to switch and talk about the Democratic Senate primary that we have tomorrow. Colin already spent a lot of money. We've seen it on our airwaves here. Roland Gutierrez doesn't have nearly that much money to spend. Do you think this is going to a runoff, or do you think that we're going to see a winner tomorrow in the Democratic Senate primary?
I'll give you a quick history lesson. Go back to 2014 when Wendy Davis was running for governor, and she ended up running against Greg Abbott. In the Democratic primary, you saw that candidates with Hispanic surnames outperformed her in the Valley in South Texas. And in 2018, when Beto O'Rourke was going to end up running for U.S. Senate against Ted Cruz, the same thing happened. You had those with Hispanic surnames with no money outperforming in the Valley. And now what you have, very interesting, if you look at the early voting turnout so far, you look at the map of Texas, where are people voting in the Democratic primary? It's in the Valley, South Texas counties that are south of Interstate 10. And so even though Gutierrez doesn't have that much money, as you said, he certainly couldn't compete on the airwaves with somebody like Colin Allred. He has that Hispanic surname. Of course, they know him in South Texas as the senator who represents the Uvalde area and has been on national TV talking about that for the last couple of years. So I wouldn't count out a runoff at all. I think it might be likely that we see that.
Very interesting. Of course, former San Antonio City Councilman as well. So we know Roland Gutierrez very well. Scott Braddock, always appreciate your time. I know you have a busy 24, 36 hours ahead of you. So always appreciate you making time for us.
It's so close to being done. Thank y'all so much.
Yeah, watch it. Yeah, watch him. Read what he writes on the Quorum Report. He's got a great article on there right now about the Abbott effect that he's seeing out and about. Scott, thank you.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you for watching KSAT. If you're on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe to stay up to date with San Antonio's latest news and weather.